if there's only matter, then at some point in time you're going to have to explain how life emerged. And at some point in time there's going to appear a man who's going to have to provide the basis for this idea of the emergence of life. That man just happened to be Darwin. Right? There had to inevitably be a Darwin at some point or the other. Right? So, he came along and he brought out this notion that life has a common origin and, so on and so forth, whatever. Then you can have other orientations to explain the origin of the universe, Einstein, those kind of people. Then you can have ideas in philosophy. All these philosophies are going to start appearing now. So that's why you see in the 19th, 20th century, all these lifestyle philosophies start appearing based upon just a material explanation of the universe. So you start getting people like, this man Jean-Paul Sartre. Life is just, it's called existentialism, right? So life is just personal freedom, pursue your lusts, pursue your desires, make your own reality, make your own truth. That's what truth is, right? So what I'm saying is that and then you also have economic doctrines come to play now, like Marxism, and then you have secularism, how to govern people without religion, right? And then you have like the socialism. And so basically this whole package now starts developing on the back of a purely material explanation of life, and it brings with it tremendous chaos and ruin and destruction, right? So what you are seeing right now of undermining gender, the spread of homosexuality and all this LGBTIQ XYZ whatever, and then indoctrinating children to take them away from their nature. Basically it's degradation of society, the basic fundamental facts and realities of human nature that we know from revealed books. All of that is gone, and what you're seeing is complete and total disintegration in every aspect, right? So you have problems with drugs, you have problems with alcohol, you have economic issues of where people are being robbed of their money through economic doctrines, right? Central banking practices, riba, all the rest of it, right? And then they're being, in so many ways, these people are being looted and destroyed, and their fitrah and their aql is being changed and altered, and all of it is on the back of these notions and these ideas, right? Of this. So that's what I'm saying. I said to you before that this comes with it's like a package deal. It's a package deal, right? You start with materialism, you're going to end up with these consequences that you are seeing now within these societies. So they have science with them, science that begins with a materialist premise, that we start off with materialism as a belief, then we build science on the back of that. Then you have philosophy as well. Then you have all the other stuff that comes off, from the back of all of that. So this is what has developed in general in the West, right? In the institutions of science, in education, in entertainment, in everything, you're seeing a permeation of this materialist ideology. And that's why Sheikh Salih Al-Sheikh, why I mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture, I quoted from his statement, he basically said in that statement that what we are seeing now is a worldwide, taghrib. It's like pushing this culture of materialism across the whole of the globe, right, into the Muslim lands. And this is made possible by way of the internet and social media and things like that. So we need to be alert to this and be aware of this, because it all comes with, as we said, this whole entire package, right? Then you start buying into the scientific conjectures. Then you start buying into the philosophy itself, the lifestyle philosophy of pursuing lusts and desires and pastimes and things like that. And then along comes it with the economic doctrines as well, right? And then so on and so forth. So this is like really a corrosive force. And again, we are speaking in just very generals and general ways, because this is a very, very deep topic. And so we want to move on now to the actual causes of atheism. There are 12 in number, which I have here, and we'll try to summarize them as quickly and briefly as possible, inshallah ta'ala. So obviously there are causes, and the cures are known by looking at these causes. So the first of those causes is the spread of conjectural, speculative sciences of the disbelievers, and in particular two of them, which is the Big Bang cosmology, and secondly, the neo-Darwinism, or this notion of evolution. Now, both of these, we cannot do justice to these two things in a lecture like this. They are very deep topics. I'll refer you to two separate documents. The first document on the Big Bang is an article you'll find on the website aqidah.com, aqidah.com. There's a 30-40 page article on Big Bang cosmology and the Quran. You can refer to that for more detail. To put it in a nutshell to you, how this Big Bang cosmology appeared. Now, this is where, if an atheist is listening now to what I'm going to say, he'll probably start laughing. He'll probably have fits of laughter. And you think, look at this, and look at these stupid madmen speaking about this nonsense, or whatever. But in reality, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. Right? They are the madmen and the fools who've been duped and hoodwinked and have their intellect stolen. Right? So, to understand what I'm getting at here is that this whole cosmology that you are brainwashed with in school ever since the early 20th century, that whole cosmology appeared because of a specific reason. And that specific reason was that all of the empirical experiments in the 19th century proved that the earth is completely stationary and is not moving at all. This is what the science of the 19th century established, right? And there are many, many statements. This is simply a historical fact. This is undeniable. But most of these people never ever come across this information. So when you tell an atheist this, inside he'll be thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lunatic that I'm speaking to. Up until you whip out the statements of Einstein and all the other biographers of Einstein and all the scientists and whatever the historians, until you whip out their statements and you start reading the statements. Then it's like, you just give them a backhand and they're just dazed and dazzled, right? So this is a historical fact, right? That in the 19th century, the instrumentation was available, the machines, devices to actually test physically, is the earth in motion or not? So without going to all the details, there were a whole range of experiments done over 70, 80 years, and this completely baffled them because they thought, hang on, what is going on here? The Copernican system of the earth moving, it can't be proven empirically. It's falsified empirically. So this was the biggest problem at the end of the 19th century. How are we going to solve this problem of a stationary earth? And so this is clearly documented in the actual sources. And I've 8 or 9 statements here from many of famous. Arthur Eddington is a famous physicist. He's speaking historically about this in his book. There was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to be nil. Meaning these experiments couldn't detect the Earth's motion, so they're trying to find all these different explanations to run away from the actual thing that it was saying. Right? So these physicists and, they're basically saying, look, there's only one alternative that they had, which is to basically admit the Earth is not moving. Another one, physicist Bernard Jaffe, the data of this experiment were almost unbelievable. There was only one other possible conclusion to draw, that the Earth was at rest. Right? I can go on and on. There's the book here, a biography of Einstein. The Michelson-Morley experiment confronted scientists with an embarrassing alternative. So he's talking about these experiments only left them with 2 options. One option is to say, right, everything we've understood about light, magnetism, electricity, we've only understood it because we've assumed that there's a universal medium that's present everywhere, and that's how light, electricity, and magnetism, how it works, right? Just like in water, you've got waves. You can't have waves without water, without the medium of water. And just like you can't have sound without the medium of air. In a similar manner, the phenomena of electricity, magnetism, things like that, you can't have it unless there's a medium everywhere. So there's only 2 ways you can escape from these experiments. One is to say that there's no such thing as this medium, in which case you have to scrap everything you know about electricity, magnetism, and whatever else and start from scratch, which they didn't want to do. Or the other option was to basically admit that the earth is completely stationary, which is what the experiments were saying. Or the third option is to basically invent something new to explain away the experiments. Right? So what they did was they went for this third option to invent some newfangled ideas to explain away these experiments, that the earth is completely still and is not moving at all. So this is where Einstein came in with his ideas, and on the back of Einstein's ideas, this Belgian priest came along and came with the Big Bang cosmic egg, and on the back of that, a few other people came along, and then they constructed this idea that we're given today of the Big Bang cosmology of the universe. All of this is pure speculation. It's pure speculation. And if you dig down deep enough, you'll find that there are all these assumptions and conjectures in the way that they, the way that they construct the model itself. Anyway, long story short, I don't want to go into this for too much detail. Basically, they have successfully managed to convey the idea that these models are based on empirical science when they are not. Right? They are conjectures in which there is some science involved, but there are assumptions and conjectures involved in these theories. So, as Muslims, we need to understand, we need to dig down and look at the foundations of these ideas and how they do not meet the standards of scientific inquiry. Right? These ideas do not meet neither the Big Bang cosmology. It does not meet the standards of the actual scientific method, right? Which is repeatability, testability, falsifiability, empiricism, and also the right type of reasoning. And likewise, the same can be said of the claim that all biological life appeared, just by random, interactions of matter and then evolved. Likewise, this is not an actual hard science. It is not like a scientific hypothesis, because it can't be, that claim of random mutations cannot be testable in a lab. By its very nature, it is not a scientific theory, right? If you bring randomness into any theory, it's no longer scientifically testable anymore. Randomness does not agree with science. You can't bring randomness into experiments, right? So by the very nature, these theories are actually conjectures. They're conjectures. They cannot be subject to the scientific method. This, again, is a very detailed topic. Now, if you speak about it in very broad terms, some atheist is going to come along and say, oh no, you misrepresented and you this or whatever. So I'm making a disclaimer here. What I'm saying is that there's a lot more to this topic than what can be presented in 5 minutes. Go back to the articles on about atheism.net with respect to evolution. There's a whole series of articles in PDF form dealing with that, and likewise with Big Bang cosmology. And these require a topic in and of itself. All you need to know is that these are conjectures, and the specific claims that they are making cannot be backed by the scientific method, right? So the claim that random mutations lead to new biological designs, whatever, this is nonsense. There's no scientific proof for it whatsoever. This is like saying having 1 million characters, digital characters, and expecting that the language known as HTML and JavaScript is going to develop by itself. And then once that language is developed, the JavaScript and HTML, and all of a sudden we're going to, then CSS is going to develop, and then somehow some web application is going to, appear. And then it's just nonsense. It's just stupidity. There's no scientific evidence that can or has ever taken place. It's impossible. It's logically impossible to even happen. So it's a no-starter from the very beginning. Anyway, that's the first reason. The first reason is successfully presenting these conjectures as actual certainties and realities when it's not. As for the Big Bang, there are thousands of scientists who've written a rejection of this belief. Right? They've rejected it as something that's constantly requiring new inventions just to patch it up and to make it appear to be valid. Anyway, that's all topic in itself. Second reason, in fact, really I should have begun. I've got them numbered in the wrong order. That was actually number 2. The first number in my list with the cause of atheism is actually ignorance of the proofs of Tawheed. That should have come first. The first major reason is ignorance of the proofs of the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, and specifically the evidences for His rububiyyah. And we already spoke about that briefly in the lesson early on. And part of that reason is that we are raised in Muslim households, mostly just blind following. And obviously there's nothing wrong with following the deen of your parents when it is the true deen, right? However, there's a danger that if you do not instill the evidences of rububiyyah into your children, then they will not be equipped to deal with the shubuhat that might come later from all of these conjectures and materialism and all these other notions and ideas. So basically, ignorance of the proofs of Tawheed and essentially blindly following. And this is a difference between Muslims and others. We've been ordered in the Quran, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know, have knowledge, have the knowledge that there is none which has the right to be worshipped except Allah. So it has to be upon ilm, with barahin, with evidences. So we need to produce children who understand the nature of evidence and how we establish Allah's rububiyyah, and they are to be taught the evidences in the Quran of the various prophets and messengers, because they are the simplest, most apparent and easiest to understand evidences. So the first one is basically a general ignorance, and there are certain times and places where a type of knowledge is kind of neglected or lost. And that's why the scholars, you see Sheikh Salih Ali Sheikh and others saying that we need to promote and emphasize the evidences of the rububiyyah of Allah Azza wa Jal, and instill children and students and whatever, until even in the mosques where we already have believers, to remind them of the evidences of rububiyyah. That's number one, factor number one. And you can see obviously we mentioned the cause, and the cure is obvious from the cause. Yeah? So the cause is obviously ignorant jahl. And what is the cure? The cure is to address this field in terms of knowledge. Second, then which I put here, was obviously the success of conjectural speculative sciences. This is a great danger for people who are not equipped when they go into institutions and they study and they become affected by the philosophy, the ideology, and the whole way of thinking, and they haven't got the means and the ability to see through the sophistry behind the whole setup that they have in terms of the speculative conjectural sciences. So number two, the success. So a Muslim comes along and he believes that these people are upon something and these are certainties, and he doesn't know that this is just pure conjecture and pure speculation. Number three, and again they're in no particular order, is that many people see the technological, industrial, economic advancements of Western nations, and they somehow wrongly believe that this was as a result of atheism. Well, this is not true. In the past, there are nations who came and went, and they were more powerful and more strong, as Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in Surah Ar-Rum, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Do they not travel through the earth? فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Do they not travel through the earth and see how was the end of those who came before them? كَانُوا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً وَآثَارُوا الْأَرْضَ وَعَمَرُوهَا أَكْثَرَ مِمَّا عَمَرُوهَا. That these people, they came, they were even stronger in power than them, and they traversed and they conquered and they populated the earth more than what these people populated and built up the earth. So the fact that nations become advanced in technology and industry, whatever, all of this is from the action of Allah Azza wa Jal. He gives nations strength, He gives them means, He gives them ways, and it is not that any one particular belief, as if atheism was behind all of this, or as if it's not true. There were many idol worshipping nations in the past who were extremely advanced in their knowledge of, for example, astronomy and calculation and things of that nature, or industry or whatever else. They were extremely advanced. So this has got nothing to do with your particular belief, what belief you have. It just simply requires applying your knowledge and understanding of the causes and effects, and if you put the time and the effort and whatever, then Allah, you will get strength. So strength is not a sign of being upon truth, and that is very clear from the stories of the nations in the Quran. Nations were destroyed, They were more advanced and more powerful than you. So unfortunately, many people, they look and they see that, they develop an inferiority complex, and they think that, Muslims are backward and whatever else, and that there must be something in this as to why these nations are so advanced. And that is not true at all. That's false reasoning and false argumentation. And often what you will see is that many of these causes that I'm mentioning, they will work together. It's not just like one cause, it's multiple causes working together on an individual that will then lead him to atheism. Right? So that's number 3. Number 4 is kind of connected to the ignorance of the deen. It's basically many people are brought upon a cultural, traditional understanding of religion. So really Islam to them is just really, it's a culture, it's a tradition. It's not a matter of haqq and batil, right? It's something that this is what I have in my culture. So many people are raised, in fact in many Muslim households, they just follow what their parents are doing as if it's like tradition and culture. And the parents don't take the time to teach and make it clear to the children that this is haqq and batil, tawheed and shirk, iman and kufr, halal and haram, islah and fasad. Islah meaning rectification and fasad meaning corruption, right? So they don't explain to them the wisdoms behind the halal and the haram and the ahkam or whatever else. So they lead them just to grow, and they're following like a tradition. It's like they're following a tradition and a culture. And that's why you see the phenomenon now of, like, you'll see women dressed in hijab because that's what's in the household, and yet you'll see them like they're committing fornication, drinking, whatever else, and the whole lifestyle is no different to a mushrik, to a kafir, right? To a whatever typical whatever, right? And this is the end result of allowing this jahl to continue, and this in the household. So that's number 4. Number 5 reason is there are some people who basically they want to pursue their lusts, want to pursue their desires, and they see in Islam a restraint for their desires. They see in the halal and haram a restraint, and then they see the liberal culture in the West, and they see these people having fun, having a good time, enjoying themselves, whatever else. And really, to be honest, all of this is just on the surface. This is just on the surface. So they see these societies, the outward appearance of these societies, and because their hearts are inclined to such things, then what came first is the hawa, the desire, and then came afterwards the rational justification for following that hawa. Oh, I'm an atheist because the Big Bang proves that whatever else, and evolution and this and whatever else, and but that's not what came first. It's really the hawa that drove you. Now you're trying to find a rational justification to justify what you are doing. This is the case with many, not all apostates are as fickle-minded as this. Many apostates have shubuhat, they have doubts, right? But many of them are actually like this, they are fickle. And really it's they want the hawa, they want the lust, they want the desire, they want the shahwa, and then comes all of the arguments come afterwards, the arguments against Islam, this whatever. So the hawa came first and the rational justification came afterwards. But as I said, not all apostates or atheists are actually like this. Some of them actually they have genuine shubuhat. It is something intellectual for them. So we can't put them all into the same category and dismiss them as all after shahawat. There are people who have shubuhat, and they need to be addressed in a particular way. Reason number 5 is bid'ah, the presence of bid'ah within among Muslims, something which is muharraf, mubaddal. You have Shiism, you have Sufism, you have like many, Qadianis is not Muslims to begin with, but many apostates are Qadianis, they become atheists, right? And some of them become actually Christians or other than that. And that's because they're upon a muharraf, mubaddal, batil religion, which they treat to be Islam. And then when they see things that don't, are not correct in that muharraf, mubaddal religion, because the reason sometimes can see something is false. So in a muharraf, mubaddal religion, altered, distorted, fabricated religion, you're going to see things that you don't agree with. And so that the presence of these types of bid'ahs and khurafat among the Muslimin is one of the reasons and causes why some people abandon Islam. Right? They are using reason in a right way in many cases, because they are rejecting what is muharraf and mubaddal and something that is not correct. But obviously they are misguided from other aspects, from other angles. So bid'ah is one of the factors. Number 7 is the presence of the people of speculation and false argument, the people of kalam, again people of bid'ah. They come along and they use weak and false arguments in defense of Islam. This happened historically in Islam from the first people of kalam, the Jahmiyyah. They tried to prove Allah's existence with flawed philosophical arguments, and as a result they created much turmoil amongst the Muslims and confusion and doubt. They are known as the people of kalam, ilmul kalam. And kalam is not something that's just historical and it came and it went. Kalam is always present. Kalam is to use the speculations of the non-Muslims, the speculative sciences, in order to defend Islam. This is something that always continues and takes place. And that's why we have today, there are the people of kalam, the modern people of kalam. People like Zakir Naik, for example, and people like, the many names, Abdul Majid Az-Zindani, people like that. They take the speculative theories and ideas of the disbelievers, and then they try to argue that they are in the Quran, right, to impress the non-Muslims, right, in the field of science. So these are just conjectures, and all you are doing is you are building extremely weak foundations for Iman. And people whose Iman is built upon these speculations and conjectures, they will very quickly fall into atheism and disbelief and apostasy when they see that all of this really there's no basis to it at all. So the presence of these people and what they've been doing and the way they've been arguing for the past 10, 15, 20, 25 years, this is a major cause behind the appearance of atheism amongst Muslims, and especially with people like Zakir Naik, who peddle many lies against the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal. From them is the claim that the universe is expanding, and they lie upon the Book of Allah. وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا, the heaven we constructed it, بِأَيْدٍ, with power. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, and indeed we are. They translate this to mean we are expanding. They say, look, this is a proof now for the expansion of the universe. How did the Quran know that the universe was expanding 1400 years ago and before Hubble came along or whatever else, the redshift or whatever? Right? This is kadhib upon the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, because this is not the meaning of the ayah. The meaning of the ayah is that Allah Azza wa Jal created the heaven expansively, it's huge, and He is able to increase and expand the means of provision therein. This is the meaning of the ayah. And they do the same with many other ayat in the Quran. Put things into the ayat which are not even in there. Right? And then this you are setting people up to have shaky foundations for their iman. Right? And as soon as someone comes along and says, well, in the next 10, 20 years, well, actually the universe is not expanding, we were totally wrong. Because we made a mistake on the redshift, we assumed it meant velocity, but actually Hubble was totally wrong. Even he himself said, this is wrong, I don't accept it, we need to change this idea. So someone can come along and just, and all of a sudden the foundation of what you built your iman upon is totally gone. This is not, so the presence of these people amongst the Muslims are one of the main reasons for people, turning back on their faith, and they're setting people up for apostasy by bringing weak, false, fallacious arguments. That's number 7. Number 8, so again, as each of these is the cause, and then the cure, you know what the cure is automatically. Right? The cure here is don't go to the long-winded nonsense of the Ahlul Kalam. Stick to the simple, strong proofs of the prophets and messengers, and go to the people who explain them. Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, Imam al-Sa'di, and things like that. Right? So in all the ones that I mentioned, same with bid'ah, we know that's the cause. What's the cure? Pursuits of lust and desires. What's the cure for that? Train your soul. So we've got the cause and the cure. You can work that out. Number 8, bad experiences in many of Muslim cultures and societies. So for example, you'll have one who's put into a forced marriage. You'll have another woman, on a revenge in some place in Sudan or, the Indian, Pakistani subcontinent. You'll have someone who's been, genital mutilation that they have in Africa in some nations which they took from the Egyptians from many thousands of years back, and then they stick it onto Islam, right? Just general, and then you have like a lot of tribalism and fanaticism which exists within tribes, and all of this brings about like a culture of maltreatment, right? Particularly of women in certain societies. So these women are raised in these societies, and they can't distinguish between what Islam is and what this oppressive, harmful culture is, and the practices that it might have. So they come up, and then they turn against Islam. They become apostates, and so these are bad experiences which exists, and this is because obviously Muslims are far from Islam, from the ahkam of the Sharia, from the adl which it commands, and so this itself requires treatment. Number 9 is the doubts of the apostates, hypocrites, disbelievers, and they have many shubahat about the Quran first of all, and then the Prophet ﷺ, and then the Sharia itself, the ahkam of the Sharia, and then just the Muslims, right? So the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ, and the Sharia, and then just Muslim societies in general. So for example, about the Quran, they will come and say, oh, the Quran is wrong because we now know that the sun is the sun is stationary in the earth, and your Quran says that the sun moves, right? So they'll bring shubuhat from their conjectures, and the conjectures that they bring, whether it's to do with the compilation of the Quran, or alleged contradictions of the Quran, or the Quran promotes violence, or the Quran doesn't agree with scientific whatever else. All these, they have these shubuhat. About the Prophet ﷺ, his marriages, about war, about things of that nature, they'll bring arguments. He was mad, he took from the Jews and Christians, he was being taught, he was this, whatever. All shubuhat about that. So these are spread, and for Muslims out there without knowledge, and he starts soaking up these shubuhat, this is going to affect his mind and his heart. Likewise about the Sharia, the ahkam in the Sharia, and likewise about Muslim societies in general. So again, this is a topic in itself. I can't delve too much on this, but just be aware that there are doubts of the apostates and hypocrites and disbelievers spreading lies and misconceptions, and these require scholarly responses. It requires a return to the scholars, and knowledge-based answers to these questions, which do exist. A person has to go and seek and pursue them with honesty and with integrity. Many of these atheists, you will see, these apostates, these are just excuses really for their apostasy. There's some other reason behind, there's some trauma that they had, some really bad experience that you had in your society. You had FGM, you became genitally mutilated, your parents treated you wrong, right? You didn't get your education, you're really angry, you got a chip on your shoulder now, right? And you rebel against that society. Then you come out, you become an apostate. Now you want to find arguments. Okay, how can I justify my apostasy? Start finding arguments. Oh well, then, so this is where all these kind of arguments they come along now, right? So you have to understand that not all these apostates. It's not yes, I am now an enlightened, rational being, and I've rejected. It's not like that. Right? Many of these people actually have these traumatic, bad experiences, and that's the real, true underlying cause behind. The rest of it now is just trying to find ways and means to justify that choice. Number 10, I believe we are on, is the presence of extremism and terrorism, and the whole, Al-Qaaidah, ISIS, and all this violence and nonsense and whatever else. Again, this comes back down to ignorance of Aqidah. If you are ignorant of Aqidah, you will not know that these people are the Khawarij, whom the Messenger told us about. We have certainty that they are the Khawarij, because their ideas are exactly the same, their actions are exactly the same as the first Khawarij, the Muhakkima and the Azariqa and the Najadat, right? These people who came along. We have certainty that the Khawarij mentioned in the text, and this is a proof to us of the truthfulness of the Messenger of Allah, right? From his foreknowledge that he was given, that he mentioned these people would arise in every generation, they would create turmoil, kill the Muslims, rebel, and they would be cut off each time, right? And they have these doctrines and these ideas. So some weak-hearted, naive people will come along and they see something like 911 or something, and it'll shock the system, right? And also there's a degree of naivety with some of these people as well, because they don't really understand the world, and not everything is really what it appears to be. So And they will ascribe everything, all the terrorism, to these fanatical Muslims, when really, a lot of the time, it's intelligence agencies are involved. Like in Algeria, for example, when the civil war was taking place, it was the French government and other people coming along, and they were instigating massacres dressed as Arabs, and then the Khawarij would come along and instigate it. So in these situations, there's a complex mix of what's really taking place. There are hands that are playing the role in funding some of these extremist groups, right, to lead to certain goals and objectives. So we know this already, that the Khawarij are a calamity upon Islam and the Muslims, and whenever they appear, they destabilize nations and societies. So we know this from our Aqidah. This is from our Aqidah to know all of this. So jahl of Aqidah, and then not being able to react to these affairs of like the Khawarij and the extremists and the terrorists, whatever. This is again another reason that pushes people towards, along with other factors as well, towards atheism. Number 11, the whole issue of al-qada wal-qadar, and the issue of evil, again comes back to jahl, right? So we see these people, atheists in the West, saying, well, death, disease, famine, poverty, hunger, war. How can you explain this? How is there a God? And how is this just when all of this is just sophistry that they are speaking? And so if a person understands the issue of al-asma wa sifat, and the issue of al-qada wal-qadar, and the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal, and the topic of al-hikmah wa ta'leel, which is the wisdom behind Allah's actions, all of this a person studies and knows and understands, it will resolve all of these issues that they raise about death, disease, calamity, war, famine, poverty, injustice, and all the other stuff that they bring. So al-qada wal-qadar, the issue of evil, our scholars have discussed this in detail. Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah in their books. All of this is satisfactorily answered. A person can refer back to those issues to address those particular shubuhat. And number 12 we finish with. So you can see that all these factors will often work together in one individual, right? A collection, sometimes there'll be 5 or 6 of them will work together. Sometimes it'll be like multiple factors that come to play. But the 12th, which we shouldn't dismiss, is just outright pure arrogance. There are some people, it is just pure kibr and nothing else. And these are people like we mentioned, Fir'aun and people like that. There are present people who are like that today, right? There's no other factor, it's just pure arrogance. You are too arrogant to acknowledge that there is an authority over this universe, and you can't accept that. You're too arrogant to accept that, and it's too uncomfortable for you to accept that. So you want to live your life upon other than that, right? So it's just pure arrogance. There's no other reason or explanation. It is pure arrogance. So you find that there are some Muslims who apostatize because of arrogance that they develop. And I came across one of them. I spoke to one of them in America on the phone for about an hour and a half. This young boy, about 14, 15. And this is what happens with these people. They have a bit of intelligence. So obviously you're intelligent. And then you go through the system and you believe everything that you're told. And then you start looking down. You start thinking, oh, wait a minute. I'm so clever and I'm so intelligent. And everyone else is just thick and stupid. And I can now see, I've learned all these things in science and physics or whatever. And what they do is, if there's arrogance, if there's people who kind of have this seed of arrogance, it'll develop into something else. And then when you speak to this guy and you ask him like the most basic things about history of science and things like that, you'll say, well, what's that? What's that? Who's so-and-so? Who's Hubble? Who's Einstein? I haven't got a clue. It's totally clueless. All they've done is just blindly followed whatever they've been fed with no rational, critical thinking faculties, and think now that they are somehow superior than everybody else. But that's only because there was a seed of arrogance to begin with in the first place. And that seed of arrogance will eventually lead you to disbelief and apostasy. Right? So in some cases, it is pure arrogance that came first. The rest of it was just a means of it's like you have a seed of, you plant a seed in the soil and the rain, water and everything else comes along and it just grows, turns into a plant. In a similar manner, you have a seed of arrogance. That seed of arrogance is in your heart. Then that seed of arrogance is going to be nurtured by whatever experiences you go through and whatever things you soak up. It's going to nurture you and out, and it's going to develop into kufr and zandaqa. Now some people who are like that, So people who have this seed of arrogance, they're going to be drawn towards this kind of direction. So these are the 12. So as you can see, there are causes, and the cures obviously are contained within understanding what the actual cause is in itself. So we'll have to come to an end here. We've obviously been going for a good few hours now. So this is a complex topic. We've just introduced the topic and given you some food for thought, inshallah ta'ala, but perhaps on other occasions we can go into maybe a Sa'di's book, or maybe look at some other materials in order to go through, in order to address this subject in a more systemized, in a more systematic manner, inshallah ta'ala. But hopefully there's been some food for thought from today's lesson. And I must obviously emphasize this disclaimer that I want to make, that when you speak in generalities, which you have to in a discussion like this, it's possible for someone to take a general statement and oppose you in that general statement. Like I spoke about cosmology, I've spoken about evolution, and this circumstance doesn't allow to go into the details. So I want to make it clear that these are general details, and as for the specific detailed issues, the claims that we're making that these are conjectural and speculative, we can prove that. We can prove that with evidence, with hardcore evidence, that these are just pure conjectures and nothing else. And we are prepared to do that. We have the evidence for that. But in a general lecture, we just make general statements suited to the audience. So I just want that to be made very, very clear, that you speak in accordance with the nature of the audience. And as for what the claims that we've made, we can back up those claims with evidence that meet the standards of scientific evidence. So obviously, because I know that people will be, many listeners of different backgrounds going to be listening to the recording, so I want that point to be made very, very, very clear from the very beginning. So inshallah, we'll stop here. If there are any questions that you want to ask, we can dedicate a short amount of time to that, inshallah ta'ala. But I do refer you back to the documents I said. Go to aboutatheism.net and likewise to aqidah.com. 2 documents on cosmology and evolution. You'll see that discussed in a lot more detail. This article is published in the Nature magazine. It's in a section that they feature called Horizons, where they're discussing like future developments in science and what direction we need to go to. It's by a guy called Paul Nurse, and it's July 24th of 2008. And you can see he's got a picture of like an organism, exactly like a machine, right? Exactly what this Piglucci guy here, Mario Piglucci, was whining and moaning about, right? So here in this article, he's got a whole machine-like looking character by which he's representing the cell, and he's called the organism, right? So you cannot escape from machine type language. You just can't escape it. If you're going to discuss biological life, you cannot escape it, right? So you're basically just banging your head against the wall when you try to come up with this nonsense about, we need to remove this language from education and science. It's impossible. It's impossible. That's why you cannot separate fitra and creation are inseparable. These two are just completely bound like this. That's what they're trying to do. What the guy's saying here, when he's saying we need to not use this language when we're teaching because it might lead these students to whatever, he's trying to separate, he's trying to erase the fitra. We can't do that. The fitra is fitra and fatir, the same root, fatara. The innate disposition and origination and creation. You can't separate these two. It's locked like this. And you can see this clearly in all of the scientific papers that they write. It's all, you can see all the language. It's all language of creation, design, purpose, organization. It's impossible. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? So as I said, these people are witnessing the ayat of Allah, at least their kibr that makes them reject what they're basically seeing, nothing else.
So their purpose is to misguide people. So
yeah,
what is that the purpose behind it?
Well, there is the dal, the one who's astray, and there is the mudil, the one who misguides others. Yes, there are those who misguide on purpose deliberately, and they are the ones who are at the top, who are the beneficiaries. They benefit from people being upon, believing that there's no creator, no purpose, right? There's always this is false religion that they're upon, right? So the beneficiaries of false religion want to hinder the people from the message of the prophets and the book and the wisdom. Remember the book and the wisdom we mentioned at the beginning? The book and the wisdom brings with it what? Al-a'mal al-salihah, al-ulum al-nafi'ah, al-adab al-aliyah, al-aliyah, right? All the lofty manners and whatever. This is what prophets and messengers bring. But there are people who profit from the masses not being upon that, right? So they want to hinder people from religion, because religion is a barrier to their profitability. So there are those who are the mudillun. They misguide upon knowledge deliberately, with purpose. They know what they are doing, and they spread these ideas, right? All these lifestyle systems, lifestyle philosophies, and all the rest of it, whatever, yeah? Just play with the minds and aql of the people, mislead them, misguide them. There are people like that, yes. And so they benefit because they benefit financially. Remember, disbelief, kufr, a person disbelieves because of motives. He doesn't want to leave his wealth, he doesn't want to leave his authority or power, he doesn't want to leave his lusts and desires, right? There are factors as to why people disbelieve.
How would you give dawah to the people of deism, and is there levels to it, and is there different motives? For example, some people, they do believe that there's a creator, but they don't want to assign to religion. They'll try to say, no, it's man-made, as all of them are, and I don't want to ascribe to them. So how would you...
Yeah. Well, with deists, as we said, they reject what they call organized religion, and that's because of what they're dealing with is false, fabricated, muharraf, mubaddal religion, right? So they see so many gods, first of all. They see so many different religions, and then they try to bring like a naturalistic explanation as to how and why these religions appeared, or they try to give they try to claim that they're just forms of control, and they are just this, and they are just this, and they're just that, and whatever else. So they have shubhat of this nature as to why they don't accept what they refer to as organized religion. So to answer these people, you have to establish the evidences of prophethood, right? Because they believe that the creator was just disinterested in his creation. As he created it in the way that it was created, but then he's just got no interest whatsoever, and so therefore sent no books, sent no messengers, sent no whatever. So you have to focus upon the proofs of prophethood, the fact that many prophets and messengers, they claimed prophethood and received revelation, and these are more famous and more well known than any philosopher. Their status and their praise has been made great, and what they brought was all uniform and coherent. They brought something that was uniform and coherent, namely that there is creation, which the deist accepts, and that there is resurrection, and that there is accountability, right? So these 3 or 4 foundations have rational evidences. As for creation, he's already accepted that. As for resurrection, then resurrection, the proof that is all around us in the continuous cycles of life and death and rebirth, and that's the evidence of the Quran. The evidence of the Quran is to argue for the resurrection by what we see of life, death, rebirth cycles in the life of this world, and so establish the proofs for resurrection and the proofs for prophethood, right? So in the Quran there are those proofs, there are those evidences. You have to revolve around those evidences to explain Prophet Muhammad, what he came with the Quran, where did it come from, and all the other the corollaries which come off from that, like the foreknowledge, ilmul ghaib that he was given, and all the other things that he basically came with, his sharia, and how it is beneficial for mankind. You can highlight the issues of alcohol, hijab, riba, things of that nature. So there are many aspects that you take in order to convince the deist that Allah Azza wa Jal did not neglect his creation. Right? That doesn't make sense, right? Rather, he is involved with his creation in the sense that he knows, he sends guidance and whatever else. So there are ways you can deal with the deist, and as you can see, their problem is just with religion aspect and not really the creator aspect. They accept the creator aspect. So it's more on religion and the aspects of prophethood, sharia, and resurrection. So you've got to look at the evidences for that. So each one is a topic in itself. The ahkam of the sharia, the benefits, wisdoms, the resurrection proofs, evidences, prophethood proofs, evidences. So that's how you'd focus on that. Yeah. Barakallahu feek. Say that again?
You know how you said that the earth believes that it actually spins?
Say that again?
My brother believes that it spins.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it does spin.
Well, first of all, in the Quran, it is clear that the phenomenon of day and night is by way of the motion of the sun. Right? So this is something that's not questionable. It's not under any dispute because it's so clear and apparent in the verses of the Quran that to deny it becomes disbelief. As for now, you can have a model. You can develop a model by making anything stationary. This is what the scientists themselves say, right? So the current accepted science right now, and which it has been for 100 years, is that we don't know what is stationary and what is moving. It's all relative, right? So you can choose any place as being stationary. You can take the moon as being totally stationary, and then you can construct a model and build the mathematics, and all of it will work. You can't falsify it, right? So what you choose as the starting point of your model is something that's purely philosophical. It's something that purely down to you what you want to choose, right? This is what the actual current accepted science is, right? And stated by physicists and scientists like George Ellis and other people. This is what they're basically saying, right? So in other words, there's nothing in science today that can disprove a stationary Earth with everything else going around it. There's no evidence to disprove that. You can't actually disprove that. There's nothing to disprove it. However, it's just simply a matter of personal preference. So these obviously atheists, they prefer that the Earth is not the most important place. For their view, for their religion, which they have a deen, they have a religion, to them, they just prefer the view that actually Earth is not so special. It's spinning, and then it's moving, and then it's moving with the sun, and it's moving with the galaxy, and it's kind of in one insignificant part of the universe somewhere, whatever. This whole idea and this notion is something that just they prefer to have this model. But there's nothing scientific, even though they're going to claim they're going to start bringing evidences, there actually isn't. There isn't any scientific evidence that can establish that the Earth is actually moving. It's just a...
So what they say about satellites and stuff like that?
Now this is a whole different topic. I won't really want to go into that. Yeah, there are satellites that are in low Earth orbit, right? There's low Earth orbit, and then there's what's way beyond that. In low Earth orbit, there are satellites that are going around Earth. Yes, that's true, right? That's not a proof that the Earth is actually moving, right? Earth is totally stationary. If the Earth was moving as they claim, see, this is why the contradiction. I will show you just one contradiction to answer your question. They bring this evidence that the Earth is rotating. This evidence is called the Foucault pendulum, right? The Foucault pendulum. What they are basically saying is, if you have a huge hall and you have this metal wire, you have this huge steel ball, right? And if you imagine that was on the North Pole at the top of the Earth, so imagine here's the globe here, right? There's North Pole at the top, right? So imagine at the North Pole, and imagine at the North Pole you have a building where there's a huge 100-foot wire and there's a huge ball, and then you push that ball like this. You push that ball like this, yeah, in this line, like this, like that, yeah. So the ball's going to start moving forward, backward, like this, yeah, yeah. So what they're saying is, because the Earth is rotating, what's going to happen is that ball, if we're in this room, it's going to start going like this. It's going to start going like that. Then it's going to start going. So basically, it's going to do a whole circle around